Hey there, and welcome to English in Fluency. I am your host, Alex, and I am so happy you are here with me today. You know, we spend a lot of time learning vocabulary words and trying to remember grammar rules, but sometimes we forget about the rhythm of a real conversation. Have you ever been in a situation where you are talking to someone in English, maybe a native speaker, and you just didn't know when to jump in? You stand there waiting for a pause, but the pause never seems to come. And then, suddenly, the moment is gone. Or maybe you are the one talking, and you feel like people are interrupting you all the time. It can feel really awkward, right? Well, today, we are going to fix that. We are going to dive deep into the art of turn-taking. We are going to learn how to spot the signals that tell you it is your turn to speak. And we are going to learn how to show others that it is their turn. This is going to make your conversations flow so much smoother, and you will feel so much more confident. So, grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started. Think of a conversation like a game of catch. You have the ball, which is your turn to speak, and you throw it to the other person. Then they have it, and they throw it back. It is a smooth back and forth. But in English, we don't always say, "Now it is your turn." We use hidden signals. These are sounds, small words, and changes in our voice that act like traffic lights. When you learn to see these lights, you will never miss your moment again. Today, we are going to listen to some friends having conversations, and I am going to pause them to explain exactly what is happening. I want you to listen closely to their voices, not just their words. Let's start by looking at how we know someone is finished speaking. Usually, when someone is saying something important, their voice might go up and down, but when they reach the end of their thought, their voice drops. It gets lower and maybe a little softer. That is a dropping intonation, and it is the biggest green light you can get. It means, I am done, and I am waiting for you to speak. Let's listen to our first couple, Tom and Sarah. They are talking about their weekend plans. Listen to Tom's voice at the end of his sentences. So, imagine Tom is speaking. He says, "I was thinking we could go to the cinema on Saturday night. There is that new action movie everyone is talking about." Did you hear how his voice went down at the end of "talking about"? That was the signal. If he wasn't done, if he had more to say, his voice would have stayed higher or gotten louder. But he dropped it. Sarah knows exactly what to do here. She doesn't need to guess. She hears that drop and she jumps in. She might say, "Oh, I heard that movie is really long. Are you sure we want to stay up that late?" See how she picked up the ball immediately? She recognized the turn-taken signal. But it isn't just about the voice going down. Sometimes people use specific phrases to hand the conversation over to you. These are called yielding signals. They are like passing the ball directly to your hands. Phrases like, "What do you think?" or "Don't you agree?" or even just a simple, "Right?" Let's listen to another example. Let's meet two friends, Daniel and Emily. They are discussing a new restaurant in town. Daniel is telling Emily about his experience there. Listen for how he passes the turn to her. Daniel says, "I went to that new Italian place on Main Street yesterday. The pasta was absolutely delicious, but the service was a little bit slow. Have you ever been there?" Now, that last part, "Have you ever been there?" is a direct question. It is the strongest possible signal for a turn change. Emily is now required to speak, but sometimes the signals are subtler. Maybe Daniel says, the pasta was delicious, but the service was slow. It's a bit of a mixed bag, really. When he says, it's a bit of a mixed bag, really, he is stating an opinion, but the word really at the end, hanging there in the air, often invites a response. He is not asking a question, but he is opening the door. Emily could say, yeah, I hate waiting for food. Now, let's talk about what you do while the other person is talking. This is called back-channeling. Imagine you are driving a car, and the passenger is nodding and saying, uh-huh, yeah, and I see. They aren't taking the wheel. They are just letting you know they are awake and paying attention. In English, if you stay completely silent while someone else speaks, they might think you are bored or confused. We make little noises to encourage the speaker to keep going. But you have to be careful. Some of these noises mean, keep going, and some mean, I want to speak now. Let's bring in Ryan and Jessica. They are talking about a concert they went to. Jessica is telling Ryan about her favorite song. As she talks, Ryan isn't silent. He is active. He makes small sounds. Watch how this works. Jessica says, and when the band came out on stage, the crowd just went crazy. It was so loud. Ryan jumps in not with a full sentence, but with a sound. Wow. Then Jessica continues, I know, right? And then they played their first song and the lights were flashing everywhere. Ryan says, no way. Jessica keeps going because Ryan's signals, wow and no way, are supportive. They are not trying to grab the turn. They are just saying, I am listening, tell me more. But what if Ryan wants to say something? What if he wants to tell his own story? He needs to change his signal. He cannot just start talking loudly over Jessica, although sometimes people do that. Instead, he might use a hesitation sound combined with a physical lean-in, or a specific phrase like, that reminds me of, or, speaking of loud concerts. This is a turn-grabbing signal. It tells the other person, I have something to add. Please stop for a second. Let's hear them try it. Jessica is talking, and after the concert, we tried to find our car, but we couldn't remember where we parked. Ryan hears his opportunity. He doesn't just interrupt. He waits for a tiny breath and he says, oh, that happened to me once. This signals a shift. Jessica should stop and let Ryan take the turn now. We also need to talk about fillers. These are words like, you know, and like. Sometimes students think these are bad words, mistakes that you should avoid. But in a natural conversation, they are actually very useful tools for turn-taking. If you are speaking and you say, I wanted to go to the store, but, I didn't have my car, that, tells the other person, I am not finished yet. Please wait a second, I am thinking. It holds your spot in the conversation. If you stop speaking completely to think, the other person might think you are finished and start talking. So, using a small filler sound protects your turn. Let's practice this with a new scenario. Imagine two colleagues, Marcus and Jenny, talking in the office. Marcus is explaining a difficult project. He says, we need to finish the report by Friday because, the client is coming in on Monday. If Marcus hadn't said, there might have been a silence right after Friday. Jenny might have jumped in to ask about the deadline, but, acted like a yellow light. It said, hold on, I'm still driving here. Now, I want you to think about speed. Sometimes people speak very fast when they are excited, and it is hard to find a gap to speak. In this case, you have to look for a syntactic completion. That is a fancy way of saying you have to wait for them to finish a grammatical structure. If someone says, "I bought some apples, some oranges, some bananas, and some grapes," you shouldn't jump in after apples. You have to wait for the list to be done. Usually, there is a slight pause after a list is complete. That is your window. If you miss it, they will start a new sentence, and you will have to wait for the next one. Let's listen to a fast conversation between Liam and Olivia. They are planning a holiday. Liam is excited. He says, "We can visit the museum, then go to the park, then eat lunch at the cafe, and finally walk by the river." That is a long list. If Olivia tries to speak after park, it will sound messy. She waits. She hears river, and then there is a tiny silence. She jumps in. "That sounds like a lot of walking, Liam. Maybe we should skip the museum." She waited for the complete thought. Now, what about when two people start speaking at the exact same time? This happens all the time, even to native speakers. It can feel embarrassing, but it doesn't have to be. The polite thing to do is yield. You can simply stop and let the other person continue. Or you can use a phrase like, "Sorry, go ahead," or "No, you were saying." Let's hear an example with Ben and Chloe. Ben asks, "Do you want to go get some coffee?" At the exact same second, Chloe asks, "Did you lock the door?" They collide. What happens next? Ben should politely step back. He could say, "Oh, sorry, did you lock the door?" Chloe then answers, "Yes, I did. What were you saying?" Ben then repeats, "I was asking if you wanted coffee." See? It is a smooth recovery. They didn't panic. They used polite phrases to fix the collision. Another important signal is body language, though since this is a listening practice, we have to hear the cues in the voice. Usually, when someone is about to finish speaking, they might speed up slightly towards the end to get the words out, or they might slow down and emphasize the last word. Listen to the difference. If I say, "I really like pizza, but I am not hungry right now," I am slowing down on "right now." I am dragging it out a bit. That is a signal. But if I say, "I really like pizza, but I am not hungry right now. Anyway, let's talk about the meeting." I use the word "anyway" to signal that I am changing the topic or moving on, and I am holding the floor. Anyway is a floor-holding word. It tells you, "Don't speak yet. I am still talking." Let's try to put all of this together in a longer, more natural conversation. I want you to close your eyes for a moment and just listen to the rhythm. Imagine you are sitting in a park with two friends, Simon and Rachel. They are talking about learning to drive. Listen to how they pass the conversation back and forth. Simon starts. Simon says, "So, I finally had my first driving lesson yesterday. It was terrifying." Rachel uses back-channeling. She says, "Really? How did it go?" Simon continues, holding the floor because he has more to say. He says, "Well, I stalled the car 3 times at the traffic lights. The instructor was really calm, though." Rachel offers a short sound, "Oh, no." Simon says, "Yeah, but by the end of the lesson, I could actually park. It felt good." Now, Simon drops his intonation on "felt good." This is the yield. Rachel picks it up. She says, "That is impressive. It took me months to learn how to park." Simon says, "Oh, come on. You are a great driver." Rachel laughs and says, "Not really. I still get nervous on the highway." Simon asks a question to pass the turn back. "Do you take the highway to work?" Rachel answers, "Sometimes, but I prefer the back roads. It is more relaxing. Did you hear that dance? Simon used a question to give the turn to Rachel. Rachel used not really to answer, but then added a statement to keep the conversation going. They didn't step on each other's toes. It flowed like water. Now, let's talk about a situation where you want to interrupt. Maybe you are in a meeting or a group discussion, and you have a brilliant idea, but the other person just keeps talking and talking. How do you break in politely? You cannot just shout. You need to use soft entry phrases. Phrases like, "Can I just add something here?" or "Sorry to interrupt, but I have a thought." Or even just beginning with the person's name. Using a name is a very powerful signal. If someone is rambling, saying, "Alex, I think," will usually make them stop and look at you. It is like ringing a bell. Let's hear a boss and an employee, or maybe two team leaders, named Greg and Nancy. Greg is talking about a schedule. He says, "We need to move the meeting to Tuesday, because Monday is a holiday, and Wednesday is too late, and Thursday." Nancy wants to speak. She waits for a breath and she says, "Greg, excuse me for a second." Greg stops. "Yes, Nancy?" She says, "Actually, Tuesday works for me, but the client is only free on Wednesday." Greg says, "Oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me." By using his name, she gently grabbed the steering wheel. I also want to mention that listening for these signals helps with your comprehension too. When you understand turn-taking, you understand the structure of the conversation. You know which parts are the most important because the speaker might slow down or change their tone. If you are just listening for words, you might get lost in the noise. But if you are listening for the music of the language, the ups and the downs, it becomes much easier to follow. Let's do a practice run. I am going to speak a short paragraph, and I want you to count how many times I give you a signal to speak. I won't actually wait for you to answer out loud, but I want you to notice the feeling in your gut that says, "Okay, say something now." Here we go. I went to the library this morning to return some books. It was actually really quiet. Do you like reading? Did you feel it? The first sentence was a statement. The second sentence was a statement, but it invited a comment. The third sentence was a direct question. That was 3 opportunities. If you were talking to me, you could have answered after quiet, or you could have waited for the question. Both are correct, but the question is the strongest signal. Sometimes people use what we called discourse markers. Words like so, well, but, and can tell you if a turn is continuing or changing. If someone says, "And then he said," "and then I said," "and then we left," the word "and" at the start of these sentences tells you they are adding information. They are not finished. But if they say, "So, what do you think we should do?" the "so" signals a conclusion and a request for input. It acts like a bridge from their story to your opinion. Let's listen to 2 students, Aaron and Bella, talking about homework. Aaron says, "I finished the math homework, but the science project is really hard. I don't know where to start." Bella hears the problem. She says, "I haven't started it either. Maybe we can work on it together?" Aaron says, "That would be great. When are you free?" Bella says, "How about this Saturday?" Aaron says, "Saturday works for me. Should we meet at the library?" Bella says, "Sure, let's do it." This conversation is very turn-based. They are passing the ball back and forth with short sentences and questions. There is no rambling here. It is a very clear exchange of information. But what if Aaron had said, I haven't started it either. Maybe we can work on it together because I really need help with the chemistry part, and I know you are good at that. He didn't stop after together. He used the word because to extend his turn. If Bella had jumped in after together, she would have interrupted him. The word because is a linking word that signals more information is coming. So, you have to listen for these linkers. If you hear because, since, so, or although, hold your horses. They aren't done yet. We should also talk about silence. In some cultures, silence is uncomfortable, and people fill it immediately. In English, we often fill it too, but sometimes a silence is meaningful. If you tell a joke and there is silence, you know it didn't land. If you ask a difficult question and there is silence, the person is thinking. You should not jump in and answer your own question immediately. You have to learn to be comfortable with the silence for a few seconds. This is called wait time. If you ask, "What did you think of the movie?" and your friend looks down and stays quiet for 5 seconds, do not say, "Did you like it?" or "It was bad, right?" Just wait. They are processing their thoughts. If you interrupt, you break their concentration. Imagine a conversation between Harry and Susan. Harry asks, "Do you think we should move to a bigger house?" Susan pauses. She thinks. She looks out the window. Harry feels nervous. He wants to talk, but he waits. Finally, Susan says, "I think so. The kids are getting so big." If Harry had interrupted that silence, Susan might not have been able to formulate her honest answer. By respecting the silence, Harry got a real answer. Now, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about informal versus formal signals. In a casual chat with friends, the signals are fast and messy. People talk over each other. They interrupt. They use slang. It is high energy. In a formal situation, like a job interview or a doctor's appointment, the signals are much more structured. People take longer turns. They use more complete sentences. They wait for clear permission to speak. You need to adjust your listening depending on where you are. If you are in a job interview and the interviewer is speaking, do not make back-channel noises like "uh-huh" and "yeah" too much. Just nod and listen. Wait for a clear pause or a question before you speak. But if you are at a bar with friends, you can be louder and faster. You can say, "No way," and "shut up," which actually means, "Really?" or "Tell me more," in a friendly way. The context changes the rules of the game. Let's practice a formal scenario. Meet Mr. Thompson, a manager, and Lucy, an employee. Mr. Thompson says, "Lucy, I have been reviewing your sales figures for this quarter. They are very impressive." Lucy waits. She doesn't interrupt. She waits for the but. Mr. Thompson continues, "However, I noticed that your customer satisfaction scores have dropped slightly. What is your take on that?" Now, there is the question. That is Lucy's cue. She says, "Thank you, sir. I think the drop happened because we were so busy with the holiday rush. We tried to help everyone as fast as possible, but maybe we were too quick." She waits for his reaction. He nods. He says, "That makes sense. How can we fix that next time?" She answers. See how polite and structured that was? Lucy waited for the question. She didn't guess. She used the silence to think. Now, let's compare that to an informal chat. Two friends, Jake and Mia. Jake says, "Dude, you won't believe what happened." Mia immediately says, "What? What happened?" She interrupts the flow because she is excited. Jake says, "I saw Sarah at the club with Mike." Mia screams, "No way! Are you serious?" Jake says, "Yes, and they were kissing." Mia says, "Shut up. I thought she hated him." In that conversation, there were no pauses. They were finishing each other's sentences. The energy was high. The turn-taking was based on excitement, not on polite rules. If you listen to native speakers in a movie, you will hear this chaotic style all the time. It is important to understand that both styles are correct English. So, how can you practice this at home? You don't need a partner to start hearing these signals. You can listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos, or watch movies with the subtitles on. But here is the trick. Don't just read the subtitles. Close your eyes. Listen to the music of their voices. Listen for the drops. Listen for the but. Listen for the so. Try to predict who will speak next. If you hear a rising intonation at the end of a sentence, it is probably a question, and the other person will answer. If you hear a falling intonation, the speaker might be stopping. Another great exercise is to record yourself. Read a paragraph from a book out loud. Read it slowly and try to exaggerate the turn-taking signals. Drop your voice at the end of a sentence. Pause for 2 seconds. Say, "So," before you start a new idea. When you hear yourself doing this, you will start to recognize it when others do it. You are training your ear to hear the patterns. We have covered a lot so far. We talked about the falling voice that signals the end of a turn. We talked about back-channeling noises like "uh-huh" that keep the conversation going. We talked about fillers like that hold your place. We talked about linkers like because that warn you not to interrupt yet. We talked about polite interruptions using names and phrases like "sorry to interrupt." And we talked about the difference between formal and informal conversations. Listening is an active skill. It is not just sitting back and letting words wash over you. It is hunting for the signals. It is preparing your response while the other person is still talking, so you are ready to jump in smoothly when the light turns green. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel. You will stop worrying about when to speak, and you will just feel it. You will become part of the rhythm of the English language. Let's go even deeper now and look at some more complex situations. Have you ever tried to tell a story in English, but you feel like people keep cutting you off? You start to say something, and someone else jumps in. Or maybe they just look away because they think you are done. This usually happens because you are not using floor-holding techniques. When you have the floor, that means it is your turn to speak for a longer time. You need to use special signals that tell the listener, "I am not finished yet, so please wait." The most common way to do this is by using connecting phrases that show there is more information coming. Let's listen to an example. Imagine 2 friends, Fiona and Penny. Fiona has a crazy story to tell about her weekend. If she just says short sentences like, "I went to the park. I saw a bird. It was big," Penny might think she is pausing to let her speak. But Fiona wants to keep the turn. So, she uses connectors. Listen to how she does it. Fiona says, "So, I was walking through the park on Saturday morning, minded my own business, when suddenly I saw this huge bird land right in front of me." Did you hear the phrase, "when suddenly"? That is a great holding signal. It creates suspense. It tells Penny that the main event is about to happen, so she shouldn't interrupt. Then Fiona continues, "And you won't believe this, but the bird started talking to me." The phrase, "and you won't believe this," is another signal. It engages Penny, but also holds the floor. It says, "Listen to this next part. It is important." Another great floor-holding trick is to use what we call vague language, or filling phrases, when you are thinking of the next part of your story. Instead of silence, you can say things like, "and the thing is," or "what happened was," or "it was kind of strange because." These phrases act like a bridge. They connect your ideas and warn the listener that you are still talking. For example, if Fiona says, "The bird looked at me and the thing was, it looked exactly like my neighbor," the phrase, "and the thing was," buys her time. It keeps Penny listening. Now, let's talk about the opposite problem. Sometimes, the person telling the story will stop for a second to take a breath, and you might think they are finished. But they are just pausing. How do you know the difference? You have to listen for the check-in signal. Sometimes a speaker will drop their voice to check if you are still following. They might say, "You know," or "You know what I mean?" at the end of a sentence. Often, they do not want you to answer the question. They just want a quick nod or a small, "yeah." If you start a long story in response, you might actually be interrupting them. Let's hear Henry and Ruby talking. Henry is complaining about his day at work. He says, "My boss was so angry today. He was yelling about the sales numbers, and he just wouldn't stop. You know what I mean?" Henry pauses. He is checking for empathy. If Ruby starts talking about her boss now, she ruins the flow. She should just say, "Yeah, totally." Then Henry will feel safe to continue. He will say, "Exactly. So, I just stayed quiet," and let him finish. See how Ruby's small answer allowed Henry to keep his turn? She recognized the check-in and supported him without stealing the ball. Moving on, let's discuss something that scares a lot of students: group conversations. When you have 3 or 4 people talking, the game of catch becomes much faster. There are more balls in the air. It can be chaotic. To join a group conversation, you have to be a little bit brave. You cannot wait for a perfect silence, because that might never happen. You have to find a rhythm. One of the best ways to enter a group chat is to agree with someone who is already speaking. This is called laddering in. You use their words to climb into the conversation. Imagine 3 friends sitting at a coffee shop: Leo, Sam, and Maya. They are talking about movies. Leo says, "I think superhero movies are getting too long nowadays." Sam agrees and says, "Yeah, 3 hours is too much for a movie." You are standing there with them, or maybe you are on a video call. You want to join. You wait for Sam to finish, and you jump on his idea. You could say, "I agree, Sam. I actually fell asleep during the last one I watched." By using Sam's name and agreeing with his point, you slide right into the conversation. It feels natural because you are building on what was just said. But what if you have a completely different topic? What if they are talking about movies, but you want to talk about a concert? You have to use a transition phrase. You cannot just suddenly change the topic, or people will be confused. You need to use a pivot. A pivot is a phrase that connects the old topic to the new one. Phrases like, "speaking of events," or "that reminds me of," or "on a different note." Let's go back to our group. Leo and Sam are talking about movies. Maya wants to talk about music. She waits for a pause and says, "Speaking of entertainment, are you guys going to the jazz festival this weekend?" The phrase, speaking of entertainment, connects movies to the jazz festival. It signals a change of direction, but keeps the conversation smooth. Now, let's talk about something very important: emotional signals. Turn-taking isn't just about grammar and words, it is about feelings. When people get emotional, their turn-taking patterns change. If someone is angry, they might speak faster and louder, and they might not yield their turn as easily. If someone is sad, they might speak slower and pause more often. As a listener, you have to adjust. If someone is excited, you can match their energy. If someone is sad, you should slow down and give them more space. Let's listen to a conversation between Grace and Henry. Grace has some bad news. She says, "I lost my wallet yesterday." Henry should not say, "Oh, where did you lose it?" immediately. That is too fast. He should hear the sadness in her voice. He should slow down. He says, "Oh no, Grace. I am so sorry to hear that." He gives her a moment. Grace says, "Yeah, it had my credit cards and everything in it." She pauses. Henry doesn't rush her. He waits. Then he asks gently, "Did you call the bank?" He matched her emotional tone. If he had spoken fast and loud, it would have felt rude. On the other hand, let's listen to Oscar and Ruby. They are excited. Ruby says, "Guess what? I won the lottery." Oscar screams, "Shut up! Are you serious?" He interrupts her because the excitement is high. In this context, interrupting is okay. It shows he is sharing her joy. He uses a high-pitched voice and fast speech. They talk over each other. "I know. That is amazing. We are going to party." In this happy moment, the rules of polite turn-taking are relaxed. You have to feel the energy of the room to know what to do. Another tricky situation is when you are talking to someone who is an expert or someone in authority, like a professor or a boss. In these cases, the turn-taking is more rigid. Usually, the person in power holds the floor longer. They ask the questions and you answer. However, you can still use signals to show you are engaged. You might use more formal back-channeling like, "I see," or "That is an interesting point." You should wait for a longer pause before you speak. Let's imagine a job interview. The interviewer, whose name is Mr. Clark, is talking. He says, "We are looking for someone who can manage a team and handle stress." The candidate, Sarah, wants to show she understands. She does not say, "Yeah, I can do that." That is too casual. She waits until he is clearly finished. She nods and says, "I understand completely. In my last job, I managed a team of 5 people during our busiest season." She waited for the green light, and then she gave a full, complete answer. She did not steal the turn, but she used her turn effectively. We also need to practice how to end a conversation. Sometimes you are talking to someone and you want to leave, but you don't want to be rude. You need to use pre-closing signals. These are hints that the conversation is coming to an end. Common phrases include, "Well, I should let you go," "It was great talking to you," or "I have to get going." These phrases warn the listener that you are about to leave. If you just say goodbye suddenly, it is a shock. It is like slamming a door shut. You need to open the door gently first. Let's listen to an example on the phone. 2 friends, Daniel and Emily, are chatting. Daniel has things to do. He says, "Anyway, Emily, it has been really great catching up with you." Emily hears this. She knows it is a pre-closing signal. She does not start a new story about her cat. She says, "You too, Daniel. I am glad you called." Then Daniel gives the final closing signal. He says, "Okay, I will talk to you soon then. Emily says, sounds good. Bye. See how they danced toward the exit? Neither of them felt rejected because they both followed the signals. But what if the other person keeps talking? Sometimes people do not hear the pre-closing signal, or they ignore it. You have to be stronger. You can use the apology plus reason technique. This is very polite but firm. You say, I am so sorry to cut this short, but I have a meeting in 5 minutes. The combination of the apology and the specific reason makes it hard for them to argue. They will almost always say, oh, no problem. Go ahead. Let's try another scenario. Liam is talking to Olivia at a party. He is telling a long story, but Liam needs to leave to catch his bus. Liam waits for a breath and says, Olivia, I hate to run, but I have to catch the last bus in 10 minutes. Olivia immediately understands. She says, oh, of course. Don't miss it. We can talk later. Liam successfully exited the conversation without being rude. He used a clear signal with a strong reason. Now, I want to give you a really powerful tip for improving your listening skills today. It is called shadowing. When you listen to English, maybe in a movie or a podcast, try to mimic the speaker's signals. If they drop their voice, you drop your voice. If they say you say This might feel silly, but it trains your brain to recognize the pattern. It helps you understand the music of the language. For example, play a short video of a native speaker. Listen to a sentence. I was thinking about going to the gym, but I am too tired. Pause the video. Repeat the sentence exactly as they said it. Copy the pause after gym. Copy the way the voice drops on tired. When you do this, you are not just learning the words, you are learning the turn-taking. Let's do a quick shadowing exercise together right now. I will say a sentence, and I want you to repeat it in your mind, focusing on the signals. Here is the sentence. So, I went to the store, and guess who I saw? Did you hear how my voice went up at the end? That signals a question and anticipation. Now, repeat it. So, I went to the store, and guess who I saw? Good. Now try this one. I didn't like the movie, to be honest. Did you hear the drop on honest? That signals I am finished stating my opinion. Repeat it. I didn't like the movie, to be honest. Excellent. By doing this, you are programming your brain to hear these signals when other people speak. I also want to touch on a difficult subject. Interruptions. We talked about polite interruptions, but sometimes people are just rude. They interrupt you constantly. How do you handle that? You have to reclaim your turn. You can do this politely but firmly. You can use phrases like, if I could just finish my point, or let me just say this one thing. You don't have to be angry. You just have to be persistent. Imagine two co-workers, Sam and Maya. Sam keeps interrupting Maya. Maya starts, I think the project needs more time. Sam jumps in. But we have a deadline. Maya holds up her hand gently and says, Sam, please let me finish. Sam stops. Maya continues, the project needs more time because the data isn't ready yet. She used a clear, direct command to get her turn back. It is professional and effective. Conversely, if you realize you interrupted someone by accident, and it happens to everyone, you should apologize immediately and give the turn back. You can say, oh, I am sorry, please go on. Or, you were saying? This fixes the mistake and shows respect. It is better to apologize and give the turn back than to keep talking over someone. Let's listen to an example with Ben and Chloe. Ben starts, I was thinking about buying a... Chloe interrupts, a new car? Ben realizes she cut him off. He could keep talking, but it is better to acknowledge it. He says, "Actually, I was going to say a new bike, but yes, a vehicle in general." He corrected her gently and continued his thought. This keeps the conversation friendly. Now, let's look at some even more advanced techniques that will really make you sound like a native speaker. One of the hardest things to manage in a second language is what we call a false start. This happens when you start to speak, and then you realize you don't know the word, or you change your mind about what you want to say. It can make you feel flustered. But native speakers do this all the time, too. The trick is not to panic. You don't have to stop talking and apologize. You can use what we call a reformulation signal. This is a phrase that tells the listener, "I am changing my mind. Give me a second." Phrases like, "What I mean is," or "Let me put it this way," or "Actually, a better way to say it is," are lifesavers. Let's listen to an example with two friends, Ethan and Sophie. Ethan is trying to explain his new job. He starts by saying, "My job is it is very complex." No, that's not the right word. What I mean is, it is very challenging. Did you hear that? He didn't get stuck. He caught himself, signaled that he was fixing his sentence, and moved on. Sophie didn't interrupt him because she heard the signal, "What I mean is," she knew he was still holding the floor. So, if you ever get stuck or say the wrong word, don't freeze. Just use one of those reformulation phrases to slide right back into the conversation. Another advanced skill is learning to deal with the overlap collision. We touched on this before, but now let's look at how to handle it gracefully. Overlap happens when two people start speaking at the exact same moment. In some cultures, this is a fight for dominance, but in English, it is usually just an accident. The most polite thing to do is to yield immediately, but sometimes you really want to finish your point. In that case, you can use a hold and yield technique. You can raise your volume slightly just for a second to finish your current word or phrase, and then immediately drop your volume and invite the other person to speak. Imagine a conversation between Lucas and Nora. They are excited about a party. Lucas starts to say, "I think we should bring the..." And at the same time, Nora says, "I was thinking we could bring..." They crash into each other. Instead of stopping completely, Lucas holds his ground for just one more second to finish the noun, the snacks. Then he immediately stops and says, "Oh, sorry, Nora. What were you thinking?" Nora says, "I was going to say the drinks." Lucas says, "Perfect. You bring drinks, I'll bring snacks." See how they solved it? Lucas didn't give up instantly, but he didn't talk over her for a long time either. He finished just the essential word and then passed the turn. Now, let's talk about a technique that I personally love, and that is the echo. This is when you repeat the last few words the other person said, but with a rising intonation. It is a fantastic way to show you are listening without having to come up with a new sentence. It also encourages the other person to explain more. It acts like a gentle pump, getting more water from the well. Let's hear Jacob and Mia talking. Jacob says, "I've been having a really hard time sleeping lately." Mia could just say, "Why?" But that sounds a bit like an interrogation. Instead, she uses the echo. She says, "Sleeping lately?" Jacob hears this and continues, "Yeah, I think it's because of stress at work." Mia echoes again, "Stress at work?" Jacob keeps going, "Exactly. My boss is giving me too many projects." Do you see how powerful that is? Mia didn't have to think of complex questions. She just echoed his key phrases with a question in her voice. It kept the turn-taking ball rolling smoothly and made Jacob feel like she really understood him. We also need to talk about the power of hedging. Hedging is when you use soft language to make your point sound less aggressive. In English, if you are too direct, it can sound rude, especially when you are disagreeing with someone. When you want to disagree or take a turn that opposes the other person, you should use hedges. Words like kind of, a little bit, I guess, or phrases like I'm not sure, but, or it seems to me that, these soften the blow and keep the conversation friendly. Let's listen to Owen and Bella. They are discussing a movie. Owen loved it. He says, "That was the best movie I have seen all year." Bella hated it. If she says, "No, it was terrible," that sounds harsh. So she hedges. She says, "I see what you mean, but I felt like it was a little bit too long for me." Or she might say, "I guess I didn't really enjoy the ending." The phrases, "I see what you mean," "but," and "I guess," are softeners. They signal that she is taking her turn to disagree, but she is doing it politely. It keeps the conversation safe and comfortable for both of them. Now, let's revisit silence. We talked about wait time earlier, but I want you to think about silence as a tool for emphasis. Sometimes, the best way to signal that you are finished with a very important point is to stay silent after you say it. If you keep talking, you dilute the power of your words. This is called a dramatic pause. It is a very strong signal that the ball is in your court, and the other person needs to respond to the weight of what you just said. Imagine two colleagues, Harry and Chloe. Harry is giving Chloe some serious advice. He looks her in the eye and says, "Chloe, if you want this promotion, you really need to speak up more in the meetings." Then he stops. He doesn't say, "Okay," or "Right?" He just stays silent. That silence puts pressure on Chloe to respond. It forces her to take the turn. She feels the weight of the silence. She says, "You are right, Harry. I have been too shy." Harry used silence to pass the turn effectively. It is a powerful move, so use it carefully. Okay, are you ready for the main event? I want you to listen to a final long conversation between three people: Leo, Chloe, and Harry. They are trying to decide where to go for a group holiday. I want you to close your eyes and imagine you are sitting at the table with them. Listen for every signal we have practiced. Listen for the falling intonation, the back channeling, the interruptions, the polite disagreements, the hedging, and the silence. The conversation starts. Leo takes the initiative. He says, "Okay, guys, we really need to book our holiday soon. The prices are going up every day." He drops his voice on day, signaling he is done. Chloe back-channels immediately. "I know, right? I have been looking at flights online." She uses "I know, right?" to show agreement, and takes the turn. She continues, "And honestly, I think we should go to Spain. The weather is supposed to be amazing there." She hedges with "honestly" and states her preference. Harry wants to disagree, but politely. He waits for her to finish, and then uses a hedge. He says, "Spain sounds great, but I was kind of hoping we could go somewhere colder. Maybe the mountains?" The phrase "kind of hoping" softens his disagreement. Leo jumps back in. He wants to find a compromise. He says, "The mountains are nice, but aren't they really expensive this time of year?" He uses a tag question, "Aren't they?" which invites agreement. Chloe nods and says, "Yeah, that is what I was thinking. Plus, I just want to lie on a beach and do nothing. She emphasizes nothing. Harry hears this. He realizes he is outnumbered. He decides to yield. He uses a yielding signal. He says, "Well, if you guys really want the beach, I am happy to go there. I don't mind swimming." The phrase, "I am happy to go there," is a clear concession. He is passing the final decision to them. Leo senses the conversation is reaching a conclusion. He sums it up. "Okay, so Spain it is. Should we look at hotels tonight or tomorrow?" This is a direct question, handing the turn to either of them. Chloe says, "Let's do it tonight. I am too excited to wait." Harry says, "Tonight works for me too." They have successfully reached a decision. Notice how they didn't fight. They used signals to check each other's opinions and to yield when necessary. Did you catch all of that? Leo started with a statement of fact. Chloe agreed and proposed an idea. Harry disagreed politely using kind of. Leo asked a checking question. Chloe reinforced her idea. Harry yielded using "I am happy to," and Leo closed with a plan. It was a perfect dance of turn-taking. Nobody felt ignored. Nobody felt bullied. It was a balanced conversation. Now, let's imagine that conversation went wrong. What if Harry hadn't used the hedge? What if he said, "No, I hate Spain. It is too hot. We are going to the mountains"? That would have stopped the flow. Chloe and Leo might have felt defensive. The conversation would have become an argument. But because Harry used the soft signals, they stayed friends and solved the problem. That is the magic of turn-taking. It is not just about grammar. It is about social harmony. I want to give you one last piece of advice before we wrap up. Stop worrying about being perfect. Many students are so afraid of making a mistake or interrupting at the wrong time that they stay silent. They don't speak at all. Remember, a conversation with a few mistakes is better than no conversation at all. Native speakers interrupt each other. We stumble over our words. We say and ah. We lose our train of thought. It is normal. If you enter a conversation and you miss a signal, it is okay. Just smile, apologize, and keep going. The more you speak, the better you will get at hearing the music of the language. Try to immerse yourself in English every day, even for just 10 minutes. Listen to a podcast, watch a vlog, or talk to yourself in the shower. But when you listen, don't just listen for the words. Listen for the music. Is the voice going up or down? Is there a silence? Is there a but? Pretend you are a detective, and your job is to find the hidden signals in every sentence. Once you start noticing them, you cannot stop seeing them. It becomes a habit. Think back to the first time you rode a bicycle. It was wobbly and scary, right? You had to think about the pedals and the handlebars and the balance all at once. But now, if you ride a bike, you don't think about it. You just ride. English turn-taking is the same. Right now, you have to think about it. It feels like a lot of rules. But soon, it will become automatic. You will hear the drop in someone's voice, and you will just start speaking without thinking about why. It will become instinct. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on English in Fluency. I have loved exploring the art of conversation with you. I hope you feel more equipped to handle your next chat, whether it is in a business meeting, at a coffee shop, or on a video call with friends. Remember the key points. Listen for the falling tone. Use back-channeling to show you are alive. Use but and because to predict long turns, and be polite when you interrupt or exit. If this lesson has helped you, please do me a huge favor. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button on this video. It really helps me reach more students just like you. And leave a comment below telling me which signal you are going to practice first. Are you going to try the echo technique? Or maybe the anyway exit strategy? I want to hear from you. You guys are the reason I make these videos, and your support means the world to me. Keep practicing, keep listening, and keep smiling. You are doing better than you think. I will see you in the next video, where we will tackle a new exciting topic. Until then, take care, and bye for now.